must also realize that the problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
While there is a lower class, I am in it. While there is a criminal element, I am of it. And while there is a soul in prison, I am not free.
Hey there, I'm Jeremy Moeller, a writer and meditation teacher, and welcome to Meditation for the Masses, where I take meditation and mindfulness out of places like Buddhist monasteries, expensive retreat centers, and corporate America and into the lives of working people. In other words, making meditation accessible. This episode is about how mindfulness, our ability to stay in the present moment, is always available to us, which doesn't seem obvious. If you're like me, you spend so much time thinking about something that happened in the past or worrying about the future. What I'm going to try to get across in this episode is that you're holding yourself back back from being mindful. We are holding ourselves back from being mindful. And I'm going to use a metaphor to do so. So, here we go. There's a common metaphor in meditation circles that likens mindfulness to the sun. First, just so we're on the same page, let's get a working definition of mindfulness. So what is mindfulness? There are a bunch of definitions for it, but the way I describe it is being in touch with what's happening in the present moment, both inside and outside. Inside meaning thoughts, emotions, feelings, sensations in the body. Outside meaning what's happening around us or you. This would be sights, sounds, what other people are doing and feeling, and so on. So mindfulness is being in touch, noticing, paying attention to both of those things at the same time. First of all, what's the opposite of that? Well, being caught up in the past or the present in the mind. So telling stories about what happened in the past, something that maybe replaying a conversation that was particularly difficult. I know I do that a lot. It's often when I wake up in the morning, that's the first thing in my mind is, whoa, I should have said this. Why did I say that? Was I really present? All this sort of judgment about the past. Or paying attention to the future, worrying about something later in the day. Usually a tough conversation I need to have. A lot of times I'm worried about conversations and other people, but let's save that for another day. I like this explanation from WebMD for mindfulness. So, quote, "The opposite of mindfulness is being on autopilot. That's when you do things without any thought or consideration. You're on autopilot, for instance, when you back out of your driveway and head to work on a Saturday when you meant to go to the park." Again, a lot of times when I'm on autopilot, I'm worried about something in the future or replaying something in the past. And when I'm caught up in those storylines, I'm not being mindful. In his trademark wit, Chogyam Trungpa, the great and late Tibetan Buddhist master, said being mindful is being here, fully minded. So back to the metaphor. Mindfulness, as I just described, is like the sun. It's always shining bright, even on a cloudy day. So the sun is there, during the day. It only gets clouded over by clouds. It only gets obscured by clouds. And in the metaphor, the clouds are our thoughts and emotions. Again, these storylines usually about the past or present. And the power behind this metaphor is that it helps us see that these storylines, these thoughts and emotions are temporary distractions. That we can simply watch them come up, just like clouds. Let them float by and the sun will come back out again. So our mindfulness is there. It's only being obscured by these thoughts and emotions and these storylines. If we don't get attached to these storylines, we just sort of watch them like clouds. Eventually they'll go away and we'll be able to be mindful again. So again, the point is mindfulness is innate. We already have the ability all the time to be mindful, no matter what's happening. And that's our kind of basic freedom as human beings, no matter what the conditions are. And I'll talk about conditions here in a bit. mindfulness isn't something that we need to learn how to do. We actually just really need to learn how to remember that it's already there and we have access to it. But that's not exactly the metaphor I want to talk about on this episode. I think there's a better metaphor, and it's actually the moon. And this is because it helps me remember that I get in the way, or I get in my own way when it comes to being mindful, that those clouds are my own thoughts and emotions. They're not just random things happening, that I have some sense of control over whether I get attached to them or not. And this is just like the sun. The moon is always full, quote unquote, even though it changes shape every night. From our vantage point here on Earth, it's always full, standing ready to reflect the light of the sun, whether that light reaches it or not, right? It's just there. It's always there, no matter what. And the thing that obscures it is the Earth, which you could look at as us in this metaphor, the very thing that perceives its light, right? So we get in the way of the light that shines on the moon. We get in the way of the moon reflecting light. That's the better way to put it. So how do we do that? How do we obscure this mindfulness? How do we forget about it? How do we go on autopilot? Well, like I said, we get caught up in thoughts and emotions. And the storylines cause us to forget how free we are to relate however we like to what is. Again, that's that freedom, that basic freedom. We can either relate by being mindful and present in the moment, or we can escape through thoughts and emotions. Or we can react, get angry, etc. We can attach to the emotions, right? And try to change what is rather than just accepting things as they are and trying to work with them. So, two big caveats, because what I just said is very loaded, right? We obscure, or it's our fault that we aren't mindful, right? That's essentially what I just said. And then the implication is, then I can just change that myself. So two big caveats. One is emotions are not bad. That was the other implication. When a lot of people think about meditation, Buddhism, and mindfulness, they imagine a monk sitting in a cave, shaved head, staring at a wall, not showing any emotion. And then, therefore, a lot of people think that meditation and mindfulness means that one is very cold and calculated and rational, and therefore doesn't really feel the world, doesn't feel emotion, and basically is a zombie. And that's not true, because emotions are not bad. They're actually often a sign of what's really happening in the moment. They're actually better at that than thoughts. Thoughts are usually more disconnected with what's really happening. I mean, obviously, we can be rational, and thoughts are important. They help us navigate the world and make decisions. But again, if you're like me, and most people I've talked to in this way are like me, a vast majority of our thoughts are just worries, and maybe daydreaming and entertainment that have very little connection with what's actually happening in the moment or what's going to happen even. So emotions, so thoughts are often stories. That was the point there. Emotions are generally reaction to what's actually going on. Obviously, we can feel emotions when we gin up feelings based on these storylines and these worries that may or may not happen. But in the moment, we feel the world and feel emotions about the world and other people. And that's important to pay attention to. We shouldn't block those out. If we ignore them, they usually manifest themselves as anxiety, stress, some other sort of kind of feeling that something's wrong hanging in the background. If we repress them, they eventually explode with much more power and unpredictability. We become very reactive. If we kind of hold the emotions in, push them away constantly, eventually it comes out. At least it has in my life. So the trick to emotions is relating to them in a different way, and that is just letting them be there, right? Almost like back to the metaphor about the sun. That's why it's powerful, is that we don't need to clear away the clouds or want them to go away just so we can see the sun again. Sometimes we just need to let them be there, and eventually they'll float away. So for example, if you're feeling angry about something, this is a practice I learned in a therapy group, that if you're angry, if you're feeling a very intense emotion and you're able to do this, try to feel what it feels like in your body. Try to notice where that emotion is showing up in your body. For me, a lot of times it's my chest and it feels like it's on fire and I'm really angry, and it's burning. It's a burning sensation. The thing is, that's okay. Obviously we want to get away from that feeling. It's a little bit of pain. So then that's when we repress, or we act out, or I act out, or I repress. The thing is, relating to it in a way where it's okay to feel that. And then let me see how long this can last. Let me just watch it like a cloud going by, and let me see how big it can get. Like, let me even open up to this feeling. That's sort of the next frontier of dealing with emotions. I'm still working on it. It's hard. But what it does is it actually calms down the fire a little bit. And then I can get back into trying to figure out what to do in the present moment and not reacting from that place of anger. So that's the first caveat. Emotions are not bad. Second caveat. This metaphor about the moon, or even about the sun, but particularly this metaphor about the moon and the fact that we obscure our own mindfulness, we get in the way of the light shining on the moon, is not an ode to individualism. It's not the American dream thing, right? And you might think, well, if it's, I'm the one getting in the way of being mindful, I can just get myself out of the way. I don't need anyone. I don't need anything else. It's on me. I got to figure this out. But the thing is, our ability to see our own mindfulness is itself obscured by conditions. And what do I mean by conditions? How we were raised, the trauma we've experienced, how much wealth we have or probably likely don't have, by how those in power in our society treat us based on the color of our skin, the gender we identify with, sort of how we come off to other people, particularly those with power. And until we change those conditions, it's very difficult for most people, if not everyone, to see their own innate freedom in mindfulness and their own freedom to relate to their own emotions or other things happening around them. And this is why, if everyone just meditated or fill in the blank individual practice, whatever you want it to be, yoga, working out, giving to charity, right? That wouldn't save the world in itself. It wouldn't end depression. Be the change you want to see in the world, it only goes so far. We've got to change the conditions, and in this case, particularly ending white supremacy, patriarchy, evolving beyond capitalism. These sort of big picture systemic changes need to happen in order for most people to, and I would argue all of us living in this particular society, to be able to access that mindfulness without struggling so much. The quickest way to free, the most amount of people is to change the conditions. And if we just change one by one and everyone just starts meditating, that's not going to actually change it. We got to change the conditions too. That being said, as individuals, underneath all of that, all those conditions, we have a choice whether to open or be closed off. Back to the moon, the point is to open whether our openness is received or not, right? To be ready to shine our light no matter what, no matter how it's received. So I'll give an example, because we're a bit abstract, even though we're using a metaphor here. It's still pretty abstract. We're talking about the moon, the sun, whatever. So I played music for a long time. I played in bands from the age of 15 to 25. I sang and played guitar in those bands. I was the lead singer, usually the only singer. And I stopped playing at 25. And then when I was around 30, so that was a few years ago now, I picked the guitar back up and started playing again. I used to want to be a rock star, and I put a lot of effort and energy into playing music for those 10 years, and at some point needed to put the guitar down. And then I picked it back up, and I noticed that I was taking it very seriously still. There was part of me that was worried of how I was going to come off as a musician, that I was hoping that people thought I was clever and wrote really interesting songs and lyrics. It was interesting to watch. I'd been meditating for a while at that point, so it was sort of a new observation for me, a new way to relate to playing music. And in that point, I really just wanted to have fun with it and do it as a hobby. And happy to say I'm still doing it that way. But I took 5 years off, and then a friend asked me to play a show here in DC, house show. So it was a bunch of friends that came out. I practiced every day for 2 or 3 weeks beforehand. Really took it seriously. I kind of fell back into this striving part of myself, a very ambitious part of myself that drove me to play music in the first place. And then when it came time to the show, I only played 3 songs. It was a very short set. But because I had been meditating and paying attention to how I related to emotions in the present moment, I shifted some of that ambition and striving and sort of a goal-oriented way of looking at it to trying to be open when I played. Trying to be, in this case, like the moon, and just put it out there and not worry about how I was coming off to folks, how I was sounding, how if it was being received or not, if people were feeling the vibe. And I just played. And there were probably moments before when I did that. I usually took some level of alcohol or other sort of drugs to lower inhibition enough to just play in front of people and sing and say, sing lyrics and tell stories and make jokes between songs and not really worry about how it was coming off and being self-conscious and nervous. But this time I didn't need any of that, and I just did it. And I was able to maintain it most of the time I was playing. It was really fun. I played 3 songs. Again, that's short. That's like 9-10 minutes, somewhere in there. But it was exhausting. It was so exhausting to stay open like that and put myself out there and not worry about it. And I actually slept until like noon the next day because it was just so taxing on me emotionally to do that. And yeah, so that's an example of being the moon, right? And standing ready and open, and putting yourself out there, and sort of presuming freedom before seeing if you get it from everyone else. I don't think the takeaway is that it needs to be exhausting. That was probably because it was the first time I had done that in a long time, so that wore me out. When I've played more recently, I felt like I was pretty open playing, but I wasn't very tired the next day, so getting better at it. But I'm going to end with this. And this is a quote from, again, Chogyam Trungpa, Cogyam, that's Trungpa, the late Tibetan Buddhist master. And he talked about a story, I would imagine, in Tibetan Buddhism about the moon shining on 100 bowls of water. And here's what he said. Openness means this kind of absolute trust and self-confidence. If the bowls are there, they will reflect your moonness, If they are not there, they will not. Or if they are only half there, then they will reflect only half the moon. It is up to them. You are just there, the moon, open, and the bowls may reflect you or not. A few things before you get on with your day. Make sure you're subscribed to Meditation for the Masses on iTunes or whatever app you use for podcasts. That's so you won't miss an episode. If you want more from me, sign up for my weekly email on meditation at jeremymoeller.blog/signup. My website also has free recordings of guided meditations and when and where I teach meditation in person. I generally teach in the Washington, D.C. area, but hope to expand my reach in the near future. And finally, please rate this episode on whatever app you use to listen to it. You might not realize how important that is. I spent years loving podcasts like The Tim Ferriss Show and The Dig without ever actually rating them, even though their host would ask me to rate them on every episode. Ratings make podcast apps recommend Meditation for the Masses to folks looking for podcasts on meditation. So it's really important to me. I deeply appreciate you listening. Thank you.